Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour, we're going to have our own Karl Asmussen. He's going to talk about Euroracks and modular synths. We're pretty excited about it, so stay tuned for that in the second hour. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Our first in from David Brady in New York, New York. ZoomIso, trying to ISO audio to discrete channels in an NDI workflow using the stock Apple sound drivers as a source and destination. ZoomIso is only presenting 2 channels to Loopback. Is there any more advanced setup needed, or do I need an interface?
Yeah, so we did discuss this in Discord, and Juan Carlos, of course, gave me the answer immediately, and then I wouldn't listen to it. So I'll tell you the answer, but I don't want to sound like I came up with it, and it was also confirmed by others. So what happens with ZoomIso is if you bring the ZoomIso object into Loopback, it only is going to have 2 channels. That's kind of a base channels. What you have to do is set the pass-through, and then in the outputs, in the middle column in Loopback, you add all the outputs that you need. So you add, say you want 8 channels or whatever down there. So you add those to that pass-through. Now you have this new object that has 8 outputs. It actually is ZoomIso. When you add that as a source, ZoomIso will now give you the 8 channels that you're looking for. So you need to build it in Loopback first, then bring it into ZoomIso, and then it'll appear with all the channels that you need. Next question.
Next question in from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. If I'm using ZoomIso to split out feeds for a show that will end up back in Zoom or on YouTube, what frame rate should I use? Should everything just be set to 30?
Yeah, it's 30 frames a second is a solid number for that. When watching the statistics, I see it kind of fluctuate between about 25 and 33. Is just kind of like the range that I see it go, because that's what happens with WebRTC is you get different frame rates because it's throwing frames away to stay in real time. Now, the great thing about ZoomIso is that it will correct all of that. So what it will deliver to you is whatever numbers that you that you hand in. So no matter what's coming in over Zoom, it's going to push out a proper output out of the SDI or HDMI that you have connected there. So yeah, your best bet is to go ahead and set it to. I would set it to 29.97. You can set it to 30 if you like, but that's crazy. All right, next question.
Next one in from Ryan Rademan in Chicago, Illinois. Can you share your thoughts on the Insta360 Link versus the Logitech Brio for a professional meeting setup? Assume there is a solid 3-point lighting setup for the subject and no clear need for a pan-tilt zoom functionality.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Unfortunately, that's one of the great features of the Link Insta360 is the PTZ. But picture for picture versus the Brio, certainly the Insta360 is a clearer, much better picture. The Brio is a solid camera for its price, and it's a highly recommended one. The other thing is if you're sending it out to somebody, we've talked about it before. We're concerned that the Insta360 is so small and very fragile because of the servo motors that are in it that it might get broken. So the Brio is not quite so delicate in terms of how it works.
Yeah, exactly what Mitchell said. And this is the little 360, so it's very tiny. I think it's good for scale to pick one up and show you. It's a very tiny little thing, and it feels very fragile. I don't know if it actually is fragile, but it feels fragile. We have not sent these out to civilians, people that we're just trying to bring into a show. I do think it is considerably better as a user. It is considerably better than the Brio, and we've stuck with the Brio for years, 3-4 years. That's all we've used, and we still will send them out. Color reproduction, control, and while there's no clear need for a PTZ, what happens when you have a PTZ is you make fine adjustments. Someone's a little too low, someone's a little too high. With a regular webcam, you go, well, that's what it's going to be. With a PTZ camera, you can sit there and quietly just move it a little bit, and it really makes things a lot easier. So this is if you had the money and you have the choice, and you're going to use it yourself, then this is the right one. If you are going to send it to someone, it just depends on who that is as to whether that makes the most sense. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I wouldn't think it's that fragile. I think it's the same camera and servos that the DJI Osmo Pocket uses. And those things are pretty robust. I've had one for a long time and not had any problem with it. You
Right.
throw it in a case and throw it in your pocket and carry it around and pull it
Yeah.
out and hold it in your hand.
Yeah.
And this is designed to sit on top of a monitor, so it's not going to get a lot of rough treatment.
Right.
So I don't think it's that fragile.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I have been thinking about is the opportunity to, I have been thinking about connecting this with a Mac Mini that we send out to a partner. And the idea is, or a laptop, but with a Mac Mini, the idea is to put two HDMIs in there to fake the monitors. And on the second monitor have, in that area, have the control for this so that they go ahead and put it up. But now we can sit there and move it around and zoom in and zoom out and do all the things that we want to do. I think it could really be a big game changer for us. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was thinking that maybe it's an appropriate size and functionality to put inside a teleprompter, provided it's not too small.
Yeah, you could. Absolutely. You could probably put it in a pocket. So one of the things that we did, I don't think I have an easy picture that I can find really quickly. We used to take the predecessor to the Brio, the 920. Is that right? Yeah, the 920, C920. And we would vacuum pack it into a teleprompter. So literally we would put there, it just looked like a flat thing that had the glass on it. And we just pull it up like this and they'd see the monitor, this is for Hangouts back in the day. This is 10 years ago. But to do the camera, we just literally had the 920 just vacuum packed into the behind the glass, and it worked great. You just pull it open, it would start up, and it would be off to the races. The only problem was we really had to get people to move move the whole glass up and down so that we can get the right framing. So to your point, if we figured out a way to mount that effectively, into that cavity, it could be something that you could absolutely do. And then you'd be able to move around a little bit and reframe inside of that. It sounds like a good little research project. Go ahead, Courtney.
Depending upon the size of the teleprompter, you want to mount it as close to the back of the glass as possible without any chance of it ever scraping the glass. And then you'll have the largest degree of freedom without it vignetting when you're panning and tilting around within the glass itself. And this, because of its tiny size, you should be able to get, about 90 degrees of freedom as far as pan, tilt, zoom goes.
Yeah. And it was, and we put the ones that we had as right up against that glass. The bottom piece of it was right up against it, and it works really well. So I think that you could build something really interesting that would, to Mitchell's point and to Courtney's point, that could be a really great solution for that. Next question.
Next in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Do you have any advice when dealing with clients that want to control all show aspects without delegating? Thanks.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Make sure they're brilliant and they know what they're doing. Because if they think they know what they're doing, but they don't really know what they're doing, then you're in for a train wreck for sure.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have a special line item for clients like that. It's usually not very accommodating.
I mean, I think that a lot of that has to do, especially at the beginning, with trust. They have to trust that someone else is going to do it at least as well as they are. And I think that sometimes takes time, is that it just takes time for them to build up a trust that you're going to do it the way that they want to do it, regardless of whether it's the right way or not. Generally, what I found is that the first thing to do is just to figure out how to replicate what they're trying to do and get to a point where you're ahead of them and you're just giving them the data. And a lot of people that were control personalities will tend to let go if they feel like if you start building trust up with them. And the hard part is it's hard to build trust sometimes because not delegating kind of ruins the event. And so it's really hard to make the event work well, especially as it scales. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're working with a Hollywood starlet who seems to, and a lot of them, trust me, dictate how to light themselves, how to mic themselves, which side of the camera which side of them to put the camera on. You generally have to listen to them and accommodate them because, it's their image that you're putting out there and they're in control of their image. So you have to respect that to some degree. And there are some Hollywood stars that like to comment on, the type of camera, the sample rate you're going to use and the sound and everything else. But you usually have to accommodate them because they have large egos and large paychecks.
Yeah, and again, even if it's a small little company that's trying to build a stream, I mean, again, they're trying to do something. They're limited to what they know. You just have to remember when you're dealing with someone, their company's on the line, their job's on the line, their forward progress and their corporation is on the line. They have a lot to, they do have a lot at stake, when they're bringing you in, and so you really have to find a way to be to create trust, create confidence. It really is a confidence game. It's literally is that, and that comes from everything from how you respond to them, to how you respond to others around them, to how you plan, to how you are in the meetings, to how you, like all of those things affect what people have, what kind of confidence they have in you. And you have to take every interaction with any partner and everyone around them is your marketing. Like it's how people see you. And I think a lot of times people pay a lot of attention to the brochures they send out, but don't really have great bedside manners when it comes to meetings, when it comes to how they respond to people, and really getting that kind of low level, like we're here, we don't, like what my thing is, I don't tell people that things are going to be great. I don't tell them they're going to be bad. I just tell them they're going to be nominal or that we're having some issues or whatever, but we'll manage it. But it's all kind of right down the middle all the time, and then I manage all the, the hard, sharp edges. But you really have to, get it to a point where that you're kind of their warm blanket for these productions, like knowing that you're there, knowing that your team is working on it is the reason that they don't have to think about that anymore. But sometimes that takes years. Like sometimes you'll work with someone, that is, and I worked with a partner, and he was very hands-on, from a big company for a long time. And then it got to the point where he didn't even show up. He just let me, he would just we would send a team out. He goes, I need you to go to London or whatever. I'm not going, you guys will handle it. But that took, a couple of years of not ever failing, like never, not ever failing. And then doing all the things that you need to do to keep it moving. Go ahead, Mitchell.
First of all, I think that they're not entirely adverse to delegating because obviously they hired you, Andy, to do the job. But there's two things that you can be sure are going to happen. If things go wrong, you're going to get blamed. And if things go great, they're going to take credit for it.
Yeah, you have to be careful that, as a third party, if you're if you're internal, then, it's all kind of shared to some degree. But if you're an external person, like we used to joke when we work for large corporations, I would remind everybody on the team that we are the red shirts. We're the red shirts. You just need to if something goes wrong, we're the ones that are going to end up in the aliens' claws, and that's why we're there. We're there to be the sacrificial lambs if this doesn't work. So, and so then that just means you have to work that much harder to make sure that it does work, and that you do think about the things that, and sometimes that's saying no. I was working on a project last night or yesterday afternoon where I had to tell someone who runs a very, very large company that, no, we can't do that. I can't accommodate you for this there's a thing that you really want and I can't give it to you. I can't provide that. And it was the appropriate thing to do because it would destabilize the event. And so you have to, it's not just saying yes to everything. This is what gets people in trouble, is saying yes to everything without thinking about the entire trajectory of what that means. Am I tying up a resource? Am I now doing something I haven't rehearsed? Am I doing things that at the last minute? And you have to be ready to say no to even the most important people because it's protecting them from themselves. Next question.
And it's from Ari Block from Tel Aviv, Israel. In the ATEM Extreme, is it possible to set the art background of the SuperSource to an alpha channel? For example, transparent, no art.
The problem is that the ATEM doesn't do a key fill out. So there's no way to output that. So you could theoretically do it in two channels. So set the SuperSource send it to two different channels. One that is only, you could find a way to create, have a white fill and then the alpha channel. And then what you'd end up with is you'd have two channels coming out of the ATEM. One is the key and one is the fill. So that would be possible to do that. But it doesn't natively, it's not going to do a key fill because there's no way. It doesn't have any way to send out those two sources. It'd be great if it did. That's a great idea, but it doesn't do that. Next question.
And the next question is in from me. What are your typical work clothes when you're at a client-attended event, including a show?
Go ahead, John.
For me, I just try to go one step down from whatever the client is doing, and I typically wear all black. So if it's like a shirt and tie event, I'm going to be in a nice shirt, black pants. If it's just a regular event, maybe black jeans, black shirt, just so I don't stand out in any way from walking around.
Yep, Karl.
Yeah, so I'm all blacks. So I'll do a bit more casual if I'm doing like a day event, like a barbecue or something, and photographing something like that. But other than that, generally, I'm just all blacks.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Dark shirt, usually a polo like I'm wearing right now, khaki pants, and New Balance 993s.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I usually dress all blacks. Usually I'll wear some nice black chinos, but sometimes black cargo pants and a black shirt, and perhaps if it's a fancier, black coat as well, sport jacket.
Yeah, and I have a tendency to, again, mostly wear some kind of dark or black type things when I'm there. Now, I'm usually in some kind of producer role. So, but exactly what was said earlier, I look at what the client tends to wear, and then I just try to be one less than them, or near equal but less than what they're doing there. I tend to. I do like to wear jeans in the West Coast, if it looks like it makes sense. I have, for a lot of for events, I'll wear jeans, or I'll wear. Eddie Bauer has these like slacks that are really thin and they dry really quickly. So I have a tendency, they're not really slacks. They're kind of, but they don't have cargos on them or anything else, and they just kind of fit in. So I have a tendency to wear those a fair bit. And but I usually almost always wear a button-up shirt. So I will almost always have some version. It could be a polo, but generally not. For me, it's generally a full button-up shirt, and I usually only leave it untucked if it looks like it belongs that way. If it's got a flat bottom. Go ahead, Harshid. Can't hear you, Harshid. Can't hear you, Harshid.
You're Zoom muted.
You're Zoom muted. There you go.
Should that be better?
Yep.
And yeah, what I was going to say is I like wearing dress shirts generally, and flat colors are usually the way to go when you're working with clients or anybody. I like slacks a little bit more just because it shows a little bit difference in, I guess, old school way of thinking, versus jeans might show more of a casual look. So I'm more of a slacks and dress shirt.
Next question.
Next question in from Danny Law in Malaysia. Is it beneficial to assign a fixed IP for Dante AVIO adapters, or should we just leave it as DHCP?
Go ahead, John.
All production gear should have a static IP. You don't know when it's going to change. You don't know what's going on in the network that could cause issues. You want to remove any sort of variabilities for your production. Always assign a static IP.
Now, and the one caveat to that is a lot of times with our systems, all the production equipment is set to DHCP, but it is assigned with a static, basically a hard IP from the router. So the router is identifying it from the MAC address. So it uses the MAC address to make it to send, give it an IP. So it's kind of a static IP coming from the router. It's not something that keeps changing. So John's absolutely correct. It's just that it's one of those things that we like to do it that way, so that we put new, those items get published into the system, and then it's just a little easier for us to manage.
Static reserved.
Static reserved is what I meant. Yeah, exactly. I don't do it, obviously. I just ask for it. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Where's a good place online to get Neutrik connectors for XLR cables? And which Neutrik series should I be buying? There are so many.
Go ahead, Karl.
So the best place I'm going to suggest is probably Thomann. So there's hundreds on Thomann. So you can go through and they're all between $3, $5, depending on what you want. So there are hundreds. The best way to do it with Thomann is simply go up and you can actually change by popularity. And you'll see the most basic ones. So you'll see the basic ones, and then you'll come down to the more infrastructure, the D mount type, and you come more back down to more basic ones. So the first 10 are going to be the ones that people buy the most. And it depends whether you want black, you want silver, if you want a D mount, a black D mount, that kind of stuff, female or male, of course. But yeah, I'd suggest Thomann as a place to go.
Good, Mitchell.
I like these Neutriks very much. In fact, I've put thousands of them on. These are the NC3FX and the NC3M. They are twist on the back. If you look at them, they twist on and off. They're easy to solder. And as far as getting them, MarkerTech, Sweetwater, also broadcast supply worldwide. That's bswusa.com.
Good, Courtney.
I usually get mine from Pacific Radio because they're local, and they have a large selection of Neutriks. This is from their website, so you can order them. They ship anywhere, and usually use the 3-pin XLRs in black, but you could get them in, as you see there, all kinds of shapes, sizes, and colors. Not colors, but silver or black.
Next question.
Next question from Ryan Rademan in Chicago. If you were watching the Dreamforce keynote or other major sessions, what would you be paying attention to?
So I used to, for almost a decade, we streamed Dreamforce, and haven't done it for a couple of years. So I don't know if what they've changed. But the things that I would look at is, number one, is typically the quality of the presentation. So as I remember it, and again, Salesforce doesn't do something that I need, so I don't watch any of their stuff unless I was working on it, which I did do a lot of. But what I would say is that generally, as I remember it, is that the presenters are probably the best in the world at what they do. Is for a large corporation to have that many people in the keynote able to present well. That is not something that is done by accident. Like it's not that they just happen to be good at it. They are spending hours a week working on this, and sometimes weeks, whole weeks working on these rehearsals. And so what you see are what, at least when I left, they had the whole thing memorized. The confidence monitors that are there just to make sure they don't lose track of where they are. But what they're saying and how they're talking about it is something that is incredible. Like it's really at a high quality. The smaller keynotes and other things won't probably be quite that level, but the ones that are on the big stage, they take it pretty seriously. The other thing you'll notice is that they walk around at least they used to come out of the stage. So it's kind of a nightmare when it comes to the cameras because they have to track them and everything else. So you'll notice things that are in and out of focus oftentimes. They'll oftentimes put the stage in the middle and wrap them with people rather than putting them on one side or the other. So take a look at that. Also look at how they use their screens. Oftentimes the screens are very wide. So they'll do like a 32 by 9, for the audience. And then they have a separate deck that is 16 by 9 that goes out. And sometimes they'll cut. You'll notice, watch them, like if they're doing something that's really a presentation across the whole 32 by 9 or 64 by 9, they'll suddenly cut to a wide, not cut to a screen that is, a feed that is that whole wide one because they're trying to show something. But just notice how they use that there. The challenges that they get into, it's a very large area that they present in, and, cameras, lighting, all those things become very, very challenging. So you'll notice things, oftentimes can be a little bit rough there. But I will say that Mark Benioff, if he's presenting, is probably the best CEO at doing this in the world. And, so it's definitely worth watching and taking notes. It's a much different style than the kind of the stilted, hard stop and stop that we see in most tech corp. And he's been, heavily trained, and we have a feeling that, that Salesforce used to have Tony Robbins appear on lots of, in their sales and some other stuff. And so and he's been on the keynote with Mark. We have a feeling that there was a lot of rubbing off that happened. So you'll see what happens if, there's influence from Tony Robbins on a CEO. And how they present. So anyway, I haven't seen it for years, but today is the first day of Dreamforce. I know because I was JJ's not here. JJ's here, but not here. So anyway, he's filling in. So there's almost everybody I know in San Francisco that needs. And by the way, if you're in San Francisco and you want work, just ping me in Discord because they're desperate. Local 16 ran about a couple hundred people short. Anyway, so there you go. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. I'm thinking of replacing my Skull Canyon NUC with an Intel NUC. Opinions?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think I'll be happy moving up the Alder Lake processor in there. It's got more cores and more threads. It's got some efficiency cores in there, eight of them, I think, and quad core power cores in there that can be all multi-threaded to, I think, about 16 threads with that. So I think I'll be happy with it as long as you put that NVIDIA, if it has room to install an NVIDIA graphics card in there to run your graphics on, I think you'll be pretty happy with the move up.
Next question.
Next question in from Danny Law in Malaysia and here on the panel. DJI Mini 3 Pro got a firmware update that gives it 10-bit color. Would you like to see the same firmware update for the DJI Osmo Action 3 also?
Absolutely. Like we would love to see 10-bit color. 10-bit color, if you're watching, you're probably wondering, why do we need 10-bit color? And the main thing is that it gives us a lot more gradations in each channel. So what that 10-bit means is that normally we have 8-bit, and 8-bit means that the red, the green, and the blue channel each have basically 10 or 256 steps of gray. Where that shows up as a problem is when you have a transition between one color here over to this color, and it's so subtle, it's so slow, like a gradient, that there's too many pixels between point A and point B for 256 to describe. So there, so what happens, what you end up with there is banding. So when you see banding on a gradient or banding on the sky, it's because there aren't enough gray levels in the channels for it to describe the transition from one color to another. So when it's got a lot of contrast, you'll never see the difference. But when it has subtleties and subtle gradients and highlights that slowly fade into the color, all those things become a problem when you start seeing banding. When you go to 10-bit, you go from 256 steps to 1024. So a 10-bit is a 1024. And so now you have 4 times as many steps. And that oftentimes does a pretty good job of getting rid of most of that banding that you would see otherwise. So that's why it's really valuable, and it's really good for something like this to have that. It also means that because we have those extra steps, if we want to take that footage, if we want to shoot it in log or even take it out of linear and move it to HDR, it means that we have more steps there. So as we pull them apart for high dynamic range, they still can describe it again without banding, because they can cover that. So that's why 10-bit, and then the next thing we'll be talking about is 12-bit, but we'll stick with 10-bit right now. Go ahead, Mitchell.
The little workarounds that we do when we see banding happening on post, we add noise to the final output. Just a little bit would go a long way.
Absolutely. Next question.
It's from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Alex, can you share any details on how the ZoomIso test bed that you are setting up will be accessible for test shows by members of the community?
Yeah, we got kind of hit with two events over the last 2 days that were pretty busy on our end, and then we have again, JJ had to go fill in for some stuff. So we will hopefully have that up later this week or next week, or first thing next week, Monday next week. There'll be 12. We're going to basically, during the test times, during the 10 to 12 time, at least, and if not longer, we'll have a breakout room inside of After Hours that has this conversation that 12 of us did. And so the 12 of us are just talking. So it's an actual conversation between us. It's 12 feeds. And you'll just be able to go in as an ISO user, and that just gives you the feeds that you can edit. It's actually it's a great tool. Like it's going to be really useful, because even if you were trying to learn, I was talking to someone this morning actually that wants to learn an ATEM, and I was like, well, the best way to learn ATEM is to just if you get ZoomIso and get the outputs from from either a Duo or a Quad. It just means that you have a bunch of sources to cut to with SuperSources and everything else. You just have this thing that you go up, outputs, and start cutting, figuring out lower thirds, everything. So it's actually going to be something that I think a lot of people may use for a variety of different tests, but we're primarily putting it up there for ZoomIso. And I apologize. We thought we'd get it up this week, but it'll probably be next week before we have it up. But then it'll be up there a lot. We're going to try to do it 24/7 and just reset it it loses a couple frames of sync per day. So we probably reset it, once a day or something like that. But and it takes a little bit of time to set them all up. But JJ figured out how to basically get all the OBSs to start playing at the same time. So then they're virtual. They are virtual members. Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California. I recently discovered David Byrne's American Utopia on HBO Max, directed by Spike Lee. What do the panelists who've seen it think of it?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I thought it was fairly interesting. It was an interesting choice to put all the performers in gray. Of course, David Byrne has always been into his large white suits, but now he's gone gray. And has put all the performers in gray, and it's on a very simplistic stage with just a single curtain or a bead curtain behind them, and a lot of it is achieved through lighting effects. There's a lot of lighting effects which give it a little more color, but it draws attention to the performers themselves rather than the background, and so I think it's very interesting and interesting choreography. Takes you back to the old days of marching and marching band.
Next question.
David Brady, New York, New York. David asks, anyone seen, demoed, or procured the Brio 500? While only a 1080 cam, it's going after the overhead cam auto-framing option a la the Insta360.
Go ahead, John.
It feels like a new version of the 920 to me. Just a refresh of the product line, bring it into the Brio family. The Brio's got the name that everyone trusts. It is going to try to leverage that on a lower end webcam. It's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, it really looks like a repackaged Brio, to be honest. I think that, the camera megapixel is 4 megapixels, and so I think that it's kind of halfway. But 4 megapixels is kind of an odd halfway between 4K and, because a 4K would be 8 megapixels, and the 2K, the 1080p would be 2 megapixels, and so it's kind of, they've got some extra pixels in there that they can zoom in on. And I think that that's what they're doing. I think that, again, because when it says 90 degrees, 78 degrees, 65 degree field of view, that's a digital punch in on that sensor. And what they really should have done is built something that started at 65. And then allowed you to punch in from there. I mean, it's fine. There just should be 2 cameras. Or I still think that someone building a screw-on lens mount for, building a webcam with a screw-on lens mount that lets you decide, it comes with one that's 90 or whatever, but you can just screw it off and put a 65 lens on, would sell as many as they could possibly make, because it just really would solve a bunch of problems. Although most of us are now, a lot of us are moving to the Insta360 for our own use. Next question.
From Gilberto, Santa Cruz, Bolivia. When it comes to bonding, does anyone know the difference between the LiveU Solo and the Kiloview 4G? Price-wise, the Kiloview's SDI is $150 off.
Yeah, I don't have as much experience with the Kiloview. I will say that the LiveU Solo. And I haven't used the LiveU Solo that much either. So I'm not certain which one would be better in that area. Most of my experience has been with the LiveU 500s, and more recently we used the 800s for IBC, and those have a lot more modems in them and probably better antennas. So I'm afraid you might have stumped us on that one there, because we just haven't been able. A lot of us haven't used both of those at the same time. Next question.
Graham Cardwell from Belfast, Northern Ireland. With a television audience of 5.1 billion, would yesterday's coverage of the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II be worth unraveling on a second hour?
Go ahead, Karl.
It's very linear, so the sound is actually quite interesting, I think. There was only one point where I noticed the sound kind of, became like what would be normal for those kind of things. But most of the time, the sound was actually quite good. But it is quite linear. You can just see all the cameras along the route, and they just switch from one camera to the next. In the cathedral, they would cut at certain times because that's all pre-programmed. So it's kind of like Eurovision, but at a funeral. So it's just got pre-programmed kind of cuts.
Yeah, I think that I'm absolutely happy to do a second hour. The person to talk to is Josh Kaufman. So Josh Kaufman is the holder of the second hours now. So everything you see designed is all Josh. I barely know what we're doing from day to day. And so talk to Josh about it. And I would love to do a second hour in the not too distant future. So I think it'll be stale within a couple weeks. So, but we can definitely talk through it. We just have to have somebody then collect all the files to play out. But yeah, it's interesting. They planned it for a couple decades. So there's been a lot of discussion about it. So I think it'll be worth learning what we can from them. Next question.
Colin Mulcahy from Dublin, Ireland. Know of any resources for any documentation that could be used as templates on defining terms and conditions around using third-party services, such as streaming services, carriers, etc.?
Oh, terms and conditions. I don't know if there's third party. I don't know if there's templates for, we see them go by, but usually they come after an NDA. So that's the problem is a lot of these come after we've already said we can't share anything that we're doing. I don't know if we have any terms and T&C documents are I thought I was looking for something else to answer that question. I was looking for, just reference for terms of in streaming, but terms and conditions, I don't think I have an answer for that. Sorry about that. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He's trying to record spots on a 720 account. He hadn't realized one of the sessions, the person I was recording, had blurred background until I went to edit. If I set up this next session on my 1080 webinar account, if blur is on, will it record to 720?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, you know how we feel about blurred backgrounds and virtual backgrounds. They cause problems of their own. As to whether it's connected directly to the resolution, I've never heard that. Is that an issue?
Go ahead, John.
I've not heard of that being an issue. One thing to take into consideration is that you have to have at least a 4-core machine in order to do 1080 in Zoom. Otherwise, they will reduce that. So that is something to consider. And then the video blur is going to take resources away as well. So it could be potentially a problem with the CPU not having enough power and then Zoom automatically downscaling the video.
And according to Mickey, it says if Zoom's blur or any Zoom digital background is enabled, it's 720p only. So it will knock you down to do that effect. Next question.
Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. How would you use ZoomIso if you didn't have a SuperSource enabled? An ATEM?
Enable and SuperSource enabled ATEM. Yeah, go ahead, John.
If you have the ATEM Mini ISO, it's great for capturing all 4 different feeds and then feeding that back into some sort of audio or a hard drive, and then you can edit for later. You could also just do 2-ups with a small ATEM and just not have all 4 people on the screen at the same time.
Yeah. And it's I will say that I highly recommend if you're actually going to do these events that you think about getting an ATEM Extreme so that you do have that SuperSource and you have the ability to do that. And if you don't have that, if you're really, you can definitely do exactly what John said, but I would be thinking a little bit more about software if I couldn't get to an Extreme to do. I just don't think you'd be able to produce a very good show without the SuperSources. And so, if you have any kind of panel, it's just going to be really hard. So then I would start on a PC, think about vMix. On a Mac, think about Memo Live or Ecamm, but start to think about what you can do to build something a little bit more interesting. Next question.
Next one in from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Will you be hosting any workshops on using the ZoomIso companion module? Looked at it last night and closed my laptop swiftly.
We are. We will definitely be doing more labs. So right now we're trying to get this kind of test process up. We're leaving open time right now. These aren't like labs right now. They're just places for people to test. And we're leaving that open right now. And then starting next week, we're going to hopefully do more where we kind of all get together and work on ideas and thought processes there. So stay tuned for more of that. But we will definitely do labs on almost every aspect of ZoomIso over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. For the new DJI product announcement from the 22nd, do we expect a new gimbal, updated Ronin?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Possibly, because they just introduced a new drone. So I would think that rather than introducing a new drone, they'll be into their gimbal line or camera line, the Osmos or their gimbal Osmos.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. It says unfold your creativity, and it's showing. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they, what they show there. So that's 9 o'clock. It's 6 a.m. We might do a mini watch party. Is that because that's on Thursday, right? That's DJI. I think raises in the use case in our group where we could probably have an informal watch. I think I'll probably jump on at 6 with everybody else, and we'll watch what they have to offer there. It's going to be. I have no idea what they're talking about there. So it'll be really interesting. They have released already a Ronin in the last couple months, and so they've released a lot of things. They seem to be on quite a clip. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Next question.
Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. If you were to live stream the sunrise, what details would you specifically pay attention to?
Karl?
So 2 things. One, the day before you tend to live stream, go do it. So you know where the sun's going to rise. It will rise pretty much a similar place on the horizon again. You can get an app to do this, but it's actually good to do it. The other thing is the sunny 16 rule. So before the sun rises, you kind of want to be kind of a cloudy 5.6 rule. And then the second the sun shows up, you want to go to sunny 16 rule. It's not because it's bright. It's because all the colors in the clouds will wash out if you don't do that. They'll simply just overexpose and the clouds will just clip and they'll just go away. You'll have like edges that'll be colorful. But if you do the sunny 16 rule, it'll maintain all the colors in the clouds and anything like that if you do get clouds at that time. But yeah, the day before, do it to know exactly what time or roughly what time, or maybe a minute later or a minute earlier. But the location and where you want to set up. So do a recce, go find out the day before. Don't do it the week before because that may be a little bit too much of a difference, maybe 10 minutes difference, maybe 8 minutes difference. And then yeah, sunny 16 rule and the cloudy 5.6 rule. Before the sun comes up, the second you see the sun, you're only going to change your exposure once, so you're going to be all manual. So you have to use cameras that have the ability to do manual, and then just leave it on sunny 16 rule as the sun comes up. Don't change.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And check the long range weather and check the satellite. For the weather satellite the day before, because you could be socked in with wall to wall clouds and get nothing. The sun may never come up. So. Plan around your long-range forecast and look at the satellite so you can see what fronts are heading in and what the cloud cover is estimated to be on the day that you plan to shoot.
Yeah, and the I try to shoot at the same place over and over again if I'm going to do something live there at this, get there at the same time. And it's very hard to do it if it's the first time you've done it. You just don't know. I'd shoot, and if you're not going to be at that location, I would shoot sunrises for a week or two before I, just do it to follow up with what Courtney and Karl said, is practice. The one thing that I found pretty useful with sunrises is false color. Getting false color onto a monitor that you can see, so that you just understand. It very quickly tells you you're peaking, you're losing your blacks, or and it's just a really tricky part of the time of the day to shoot. Next question.
Next one in from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. Deborah asked, has anyone heard of Warmly? There's a link to it. Any recommendations for other tools that achieve similar results? Low barrier to entry needed for a colleague recommendation.
Go ahead, John.
Honestly, I would prefer using OBS versus what this is offering. It's a virtual background with some titles on it. It looks nice, but obviously the virtual background is going to look most likely poor in most situations, unless you got really good lighting and a green screen. Definitely look at something else that would provide just simple overlays onto the existing video. That doesn't require using a virtual background. You get a much better result.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of us use some kind of gray background that we light some way or do something else. I think that if you're doing a basic background, the problem really is that it just really feels off, a lot of times when you're watching someone with a virtual background. And it's popular and people do it, but I think that there's a couple of problems. Number one is, it's not real. So, and again, that may seem okay, but it really, when people talk about Zoom fatigue, anything that isn't a real person just sitting there in video with good audio and good video and good lighting adds to cognitive load. And that is what leads to people going, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. So because it's just really, when you have bad audio, bad lighting, your brain is constantly seeing that it's wrong and then telling itself that that's okay. And that creates cognitive load of it constantly, dealing with something that isn't authentic. That is, and it's, I've said this before, but the difference between your frontal lobe telling when your frontal lobe saying this is okay, and your lower brain is saying this isn't real, the delta between those two, the difference between those two is depression and fatigue and all those other things. And so when your lower brain is super important, whether you like it or not, and when it's not getting served, it creates a lot of trouble. And I think that a lot of the trouble that we see with Zoom and so on and so forth is using virtual backgrounds. So I think that, you have odd edges, you have not matching blacks, not matching colors, not matching, perspective. All these things contribute to something that is, just feels, it's kind of soul sucking. Anyway, so that's I'm not a big fan of them. I know a lot of people are, but I really would recommend finding just a big screen like this and put it behind them if they really want to. If they really care about how they look. You stand out really quickly when you stop using virtual backgrounds, because so many people are using virtual backgrounds. When you stop using them and get good lighting, good audio, in every meeting, I joke that, you just feel like there's a lot of people that are executives and they look like a whole different group of people, like they're taller and better looking and they, athletic and everything else. When you work in these big corporations, it's like a different set. And you feel like that when you have good lighting and good audio, good background. So in a meeting, because almost nobody else is. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, and they also get a bad case of what I call jello head, when the virtual background is interfering with the edges of their hair or their shoulders, and it just looks strange, and it's all distracting, like you were saying. It adds to that load where you're, is that real? Is that live? What's going on? Yeah,
sorry for the hard push, but we're not the best place to ask for about virtual backgrounds. We're not big fans. Next question.
Next one in from Graham Caldwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Could the panel recommend some entry-level, easy-to-use DMX control software packages? Free would be good, but usability and WYSIWYG is important.
Go ahead, John.
Not one I use often, but is definitely one to kind of get into DMX Easy is Luminaire. It has a really great UI. It runs on Mac. It runs on iPad. You can get a DMX dongle. Supports the over IP DMX as well. So just a really great way to get into it, understand it, and then you can kind of step into more advanced systems after you understand DMX more.
Yeah. John, I was going to say, if John didn't raise his hand, I was going to throw the ball to you anyway. Like there was no way you're not going to get the answer to this question. Go ahead, John.
There's Luminaire. I have it controlled via my Entech DMX controller. It's amazing that John's brain works exactly like mine does, and we have the same name.
So what's happening there is that you have an IP to DMX controller. So that Entech is taking the Ethernet connection to the DMX, and you can get it in 5-pin or 3-pin. Know which one your lights are. Of course, I bought a 3-pin Entech for a 5-pin light, and then you have to get a little adapter. It's not the end of the world, but just pay attention to that. They're not all made equally or the same. And then also remember that you can send out DMX. I mean, I think Luminaire is the best turnkey startup, and then of course a lot of us are learning Isadora, which of course can talk DMX. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, one justification for providing federal state assistance to venues is that, quote, independent venues are where artists build careers, unquote. Could you see artists being digital stream first and developing their careers to the same extent?
Go ahead, John.
I think you see most artists that are really emerging being digital streaming first.
Yeah.
And then what is happening is they're building an audience, and then they're going out and filling venues. You'll see that a lot with the TikTok artists that are popping up. You saw it with Justin Bieber on YouTube. Those are the places where you get discovered now that kind of lead into larger events and productions.
Yeah, go ahead, Karl.
So another thing you got to remember that is most of the venues make most of their profits from alcohol sales. So it's sometimes it's a bit of a stretch to ask federal and state governments to give them money just so they can sell more alcohol. So there is a bit of catch-22 there.
And then the state gets to tax the alcohol, so it's always a good thing for them too. I think that a lot of, as was pointed out, a lot of these are coming. A lot of the new artists are coming out of the pipeline. I mean, everybody's watching TikTok and YouTube. I mean, A&R for most of these companies are watching like who's getting a rise, and trying to snap up those social media. I mean, I think some of the first ones are like ZAV and so on and so forth, were like, putting that stuff out and pulling that forward. So I think that I think you're already seeing that. I think that a lot of artists, they get picked up and then they get built up and then they go on tour and then they decide that they physically can't handle tour. And then they're going to go back to where they started. So I think that you're seeing. I don't know if MIA just announced that she wasn't going to do a big event that she was booked for yesterday. You saw Justin Bieber. You saw these artists are realizing that number one is they're realizing that they don't want to do it anymore. And the big thing, though, is they're realizing that they can just cancel. When Justin Bieber and others can cancel, now it's like it's an okay thing to do. When I worked in the music industry, they just pump them full of medication and something for their throat and just keep shoving them out on stage to keep making money. That era appears to be ending. And with that is probably tours will not be the same for very much longer. Go ahead, John.
I think one other thing you get to kind of notice with the A&R people is they're following these people from when they're 10 years old posting videos. They're getting to see mature, see their work ethic, see what they're putting in. It's much of a gamble of I saw this guy at a show, puts on a great show. Now you're understanding really who they are as people.
Absolutely. And whether they can draw an audience. Next question.
Mark Webster in London, UK. Does anyone have any experience with motorized standing desks that support audio mixers or controllers like the Avid S6? What are the implications and considerations in a new room being designed?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Think of cable management, because all of those standing desks have screw type raise and lower, which can exert a whole lot of force and can break a lot of cables if you tie them down in the wrong places. So make sure you do your cable management, and especially if you've got an analog desk where you've got a lot of cables running in and out. You don't want somebody raising the desk up higher than you normally raise it up to and yanking the cables out of all the XLR connectors or BNC connectors. So, if it's an Avid S6, you probably only have to worry about power and an Ethernet cable, but and maybe a video HDMI cable. But if you're using a desk cable management, make sure you run it all the way to the top as far as it'll go, run your cables, and then go down from there so that you make sure you have enough slack to carry the cable travel the entire distance.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, since you didn't mention any pricing on it, let me offer an alternative. Go to your local Home Depot store and buy the Husky table. It's about 72 inches, just under $300. It is a crank, but it's a sit-stand type setup. Very robust. In fact, Brandon Buttram got one, who's on our back-end crew here, and it looks and works great. And by the way, there are Home Depots in London.
I have to say, though, if you had an S6 sitting on top of a $300 desk, I don't know if your clients would take you very seriously. Like, I think it would be very hard for them to be like, what is going on here? I've actually never seen an S6 on anything that went up and down. It's not that it can't. It's just that I've seen some pretty couple S6s, or a larger Avid modular system laid out, but that's always been on a pretty fixed. Like, no one wants anything to change. You figure out exactly the way you want it, and then you leave it that way. It's a pretty big board to be moving up and down. Next question.
Next question from Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. How would you avoid shifted colors on an LED wall background when color balancing for correct skin tones?
Go ahead, Karl.
So first you'll need to actually choose what color. So if you're going to shoot tungsten or if you're going to shoot daylight as far as the talent. And then most controllers for these LED walls can set the white point. So, well, my television can even do it as well. But you can actually set the white point. So you can actually sell it to D65, D55. So these are the digital cinema standards. And then you can do custom ones as well. You can actually put a custom light into these controllers. So this is how they actually, pretty much on shows like Mandalorian, they're putting a custom light into those screens because that's got to do with more the lights and the camera. So they want them all to match up, and they do these tests to say which ones. There's an artistic side to it as well, but the balance. But most of the controllers the box that actually controls the panels, they will have the ability to set some preset ones and a custom one.
Go ahead, Courtney.
You got to watch out because some of these panels, especially the LED walls, have little black shields around the combinations of LEDs. And if you get off at an angle, they can shift color, and it can turn a certain color depending upon the angle, off-axis angle you get. So look at the specs on the LED screen and see if it maintains color trueness and see the range of angles. A display angle that, it'll be like 172 degrees, something like that it can display all the colors accurately.
Next question.
Next question from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Any thoughts on the Lighticians Apollo Control Lighting Management app?
Lighticians? I don't know if we've seen this one. I'm just trying to, let's see here. Oh, Lightician. Okay. It's Gnome Tech, I think is it looks really cool. I think that someone should suggest that they come on for a second hour. It looks like a cool controller. But I don't think any of us have experience with it, but I'm glad you found it for us. Please put it into the second hour suggestions inside of it, and we'll see if Josh can't run that down. Next question.
Colin Mulcahy is back from Dublin, Ireland. Any tips on using a podcast mic on a table stand instead of a boom arm on a table to reduce or avoid feedback from inexperienced persons touching or tapping the table?
Go ahead, Karl.
So one of the best things you can quickly do is just get a large bath towel, fold it up and fold it up and fold it up until it's about a foot square, put that on the table, and then put the mic stand on top of that. The bath towel, like a pretty plush bath towel, will actually absorb a lot of the frequencies that will come in from people touching tables and bumping the table.
Yeah, and one of the things you can also think, I mean, the oftentimes the podcast mic on the table is going to pick it up to some degree if it's sitting on the table. So if you don't have a really solid table, you want to possibly use also, you can look at a mic stand for somebody where you bring it down from the side and the mic stand's just not touching the table. And then in my arm, like for instance, this arm here that I have here, it's actually connected to a table next to me. So it's on a different, it's actually connected to my work table, not to the table that I'm presenting to you, so that I can avoid exactly what you're talking about. Remember that you can also get, this has a, this has a shock mount to it as well, so that's going to absorb some of those sounds as well. So those are a couple things for you to think about. A lot of times in the really high end podcast tables, what we often see is them. Let's say they have something like this for the, I don't know, they make them. Oftentimes they're not circling. I don't know why. And then they have a separate table inside of this, and then to here they have the arms swinging out. This little table that sits above the other one is not connected. These two tables are not connected. So the arms are coming off of an inner part of the table that has about anywhere from a 1 to 3 inch gap with the outer table. So they have somewhere to put their hands and their notes and everything else. But the inner piece is just connected to the ground, and it's actually built really solidly so that it doesn't have that. And these arms swing out, and that makes it a lot easier too. Next question. Courtney, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to untangle something to demonstrate it. I realized the cable's wrapped around the chair leg.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, what I use, I found this neoprene foam. It's very compliant, and you can find it for weather stripping at hardware stores. It has a removable adhesive back with a really good adhesive on it. You can get, this is 1 inch thick, but you could get it in 1/2 inch thick and be plenty. And that really, it absorbs shock so well. I would put it under the base of the microphone. And the other thing I was going to try and demonstrate is make sure that you anchor the cord, because as the cord comes out, a lot of times on the shock mounts themselves, they will have a place to lock the cord in. So you make a loop with the cord and anchor it to the shock mount itself. So that way the cord moves with the microphone, because sound can be transmitted up the cable and into the mic through the connector. So make sure that cord is isolated from the desk as well.
Next question.
Next question from Santa Bart Gaffney in Oconomowoc. I'm sorry, it's just a mental thing for me. Wants to know, what is the minimum distance and optical angle for lighting a chroma key screen to achieve leveling and optimal lighting?
I think it's optimal distance or optimal angle. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Okay, got it. I happen to know his system is about 30 feet wide by about 20 high, and it's curved all the way in. And he also has a limited amount of space between the camera, his position, and the green screen. So I would try to push maybe a minimum of 3 feet for the lighting instruments. And as Alex has pointed out before, instead of shining the left instrument on the left side of the screen, shoot to the opposite side so that you have them crossing over. And I think you're going to fill in that center part a lot better. But I leave it to Alex to answer much better than I can.
Yeah, so the main thing here is that if you think about a green screen, I usually will consider 5 feet to be the minimum that I will do for a professional thing to do. I mean, I can be closer to it, but generally 5 feet, because you need to have lighting fixtures here. I usually use long lighting fixtures because they just give me a big source. The typical one for me to use is a old Kiloview 4x4 with green bulbs, and then what I do is exactly what Mitch said, is I aim these either way. You got to make sure that you have enough room that you can barn door this, because especially if you're using green on green, you can't get any on the person. So you want to be able to barn door that out and then go toward the opposite corner. And then what you do is you open it up in scopes and you move these, you just swing them back and forth. And if you can see the scopes from where you're working, you can just sit there and even it out. Because what you want in your LumaScope is for a very thin line to go straight across as close as you can. The closer this is to a straight line at about 70, in the closest to at 70 straight line and thin, what you're doing is you're saying, I need very little green to pull. So the bigger this is, if it's like this, if it's really thick, all of those things mean I have to cut out a huge amount of green. And what that's going to do is affect the things that are semi-transparent, which is all of your hair and the edges and pretty much everything that matters in your key. So the thinner and more accurate that is, the better you're going to the better effect you're going to get. Let's go ahead and answer this last question real quick.
Douglas Carmichael, the U.S. SBA distributed information about the Shuttered Venue Operations Grant in multiple languages, including Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. This makes me curious, would any U.S. AV reseller integrator provide sales, staff, and support in such languages?
Some do, yeah, if the money's there. It just depends on how big if it's a big enough market, absolutely. Next question.
And that's it. We're done for the first hour and ready to roll on.
Somehow let's ask this last one because it was deal with Salesforce, which is what I thought was coming up, and I didn't, because it's happening today.
Okay. Jumping ahead to John Nichols in Concord, California. Salesforce annual conference Dreamforce is this week. The conference has a musical guest every year. This year, it's Red Hot Chili Peppers. Has anyone on the panel seen Red Hot Chili Peppers, and what do you think?
Yeah, they're great. It's one of the best live bands in the world. So if you can get into wherever they're showing that, I would go. Literally, like one of just the most exciting live bands to see. There's not many that I would say are worth seeing live, but they are. Okay. We're now changing subjects to Euroracks and modular synths. And I didn't realize Nick Batt was coming. I think maybe I didn't read all the notes there. Nick, it's great to see you here. Karl's here as well to talk about Euroracks. So we have and Courtney is also known to dabble in this area. So we have a great crew to answer your questions about this. And Karl, I'm just going to hand it off to you to get us started.
Not a problem. So what we're going to first do is we're going to take a look at essentially the difference between synthesizer that we showed like last time, about a month ago, and what would it be considered a semi-modular or a modular. So here's a look at a semi-modular. So this is one we've shown before. As you can see on the side here, we have all these ins and outs. So these are ins and outs, and they allow you to do CV and audio ins and outs. The style that we looked at last time was this kind of style here.
And can you define CV?
So CV is control voltage. So if we take a look here, we have these ins and outs. So these are the oscillator ones. So what they want to do is they want to take a control voltage. We can actually see VCA control voltage here. So this is a control voltage. So what it is, essentially a control voltage is an electrical robot that does this. Up, down, up, down, up, down. That's it. Or maybe just up and maybe just down. That's like an envelope. An LFO would be just wiggling it. But essentially that's what a control voltage does. It's essentially it's electricity that allows you to control a knob rather than you having to do it. You can do it yourself, of course, but you can have electricity do it for you, which is pretty cool. So that's essentially what a control voltage is. Then the other type of voltage that you would get, there'll be another type called a gate. And a gate is quite simple. That's just an on and off. And that's say start the note now, take the note off. So that's kind of a note on, note off. And then the most common other one that you'd find is the audio signal itself. So the actual AC audio signal, which carries the actual AC information. So the type of synth we looked at last time was this kind of synth. And on this kind of synth, what you'll actually get is essentially you'll have all the parts up here, but they're essentially pre-wired. So essentially you'll have your sections. So you have your oscillator, your filter, your amp, and you've got your LFO, and then there's envelopes in each section here. But they're kind of pre-wired. I can't have the amp envelope control the oscillator, and I can't have an LFO control a second LFO, essentially. So there's certain things that I just can't do with these particular types of synth. But once you actually get into like semi-modular, then you can actually have all these different areas that we talked about last time. So the oscillator, the filter, the amplifier, the envelopes, which is a modulation source, the LFO, which is a modulation source, noise, which can be both modulation source and audio, of course, and ring modulator, which is actually an audio manipulator, but it can also be used in modulation. So once you have those, you can come into this to the actual semi-modular synths like this. So on the left-hand side, we can actually see that there is all the buttons and the dials that you'd normally see on other synths. And you can actually just, without having any cables, you can actually get a sound out of these synths. You do need to make sure certain knobs are turned up and certain knobs are turned down, those kind of things. But once you actually understand, once you actually get a bit of a clue on how these knobs actually work, and you actually understand how each section works, you can start to repatch what talks to what. And there's actually some functions that are in the patch bay here that aren't available on any knob. So there is certain features that you'll find in here. So there's a bipolar LFO, which goes below 0. So there's some things in here that you'll get. Then later on today, when we actually go on and we actually talk about another type of synth, which has essentially a very different look to it. Oh, by the way, the Neutron that I was showing, it actually has software control as well. So the software control is what you don't see on the buttons, or what you don't see in the patch bay. You can actually get some stuff to control on software. There are some shortcuts, so some key combinations, kind of like up, down, Command G codes. They'll allow you to do this, but you can actually do it in software. And this is live software. So if you press a button on the synth, you'll see it reflected here, and so on and so forth. So this particular synth does have a little bit deeper range. It's fully analog, but you can actually control some of the synths. Then the other type of synth we're going to talk about is Eurorack. So this is my Eurorack. So this is a digital representation of it. You'll actually see the real thing in a second, but we'll cover the Neutron first. And the Eurorack is essentially all these modules, and you can tell which ones are the modules by the screws in the top corners. So each Eurorack module here has usually 4 screws, 2 at the top, 2 down the bottom. So you can see each module, even though it looks like one full unit. And this has just a lot more knobs and a lot more ins and outs all over each module. And so you can have all these modules here are from Behringer, but there are many different types of modules from many different manufacturers. These ones are all analog. You can get digital modules as well, and you can have digital creation modules, which are essentially like a sequencer or granular kind of stuff. And we can do that kind of work as well, where we can actually have it generate sound, not just manipulate noise. So I'll go over just the basics. So we'll flip back over to this one here. And so I haven't got this plugged in just yet, because we will get to that in a second, but we will take on some questions before we start actually making noise out of these things. So essentially, we've got the oscillator section, we've got the filter section here, got the LFO up the top, and then as we come across, we have noise, we have VCA bias, then we have 2 envelopes, and these are pre-wired. Everything here is essentially pre-wired. We have 2 effects sections here, so we actually have a delay section that's pre-wired in, and we also have an overdrive section. And then we have some utility sections here. Utility was so sample and hold. We have a slew rate, which is kind of like portamento. Attenuators, which can be accessed via the plug outs, and the LFO actually goes through attenuator 2 before it runs off over to the filter. So there are some things that are pre-wired, and this you'll need to read the manuals to know these. And then of course we have the plug out on the side here. So we have all the ins, there's 32 ins I believe, and 24 outs. And essentially we have lots of different types. So there's different kind of control signals, which are usually plus and minus 5 volts. And we have audio signals. We also have some other signals which are closer to 12 volts plus or minus, or 10 volts plus and minus. But that'll become evident once we actually get going. So what we'll do is, before we go on, we'll take any questions first. We'll go through some of the questions before we move over to the big modular system.
Let's jump into the questions.
All right, first question in from James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Are there any good software modular racks we could use to get a feel for what kinds of modular equipment one would want to purchase in hardware?
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, yeah, there are. I mean, the free one is, it would be VCV Rack, I would suggest, because basically that is essentially like a modular in software. It runs on OS X, it runs on Linux, it runs on PC. It's kind of, I think it's a Java-based application, so it's very extensible. But it's also got this enormous library of modules, loads you get for free, but also quite a lot of manufacturers have sort of licensed or endorsed other people's recreations of their modules. So you can often get them and try them out. And while it might not be, the most super duper in terms of audio quality, it's way more than you would need, and you can very easily kind of build yourself a rack and go, I like this, and obviously you can save presets and whatnot, but then you might be able to then think, I'll buy that in hardware. Also, soft tube modular is expensive as well, but that sounds really good.
and it is like, it's not something you might do a concert with, but it's a great way for you to learn and to understand how these different modules work. Is that kind of your angle for the VCV?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
absolutely. Go ahead, Karl.
So yeah, VCV, that's essentially the one I've used the most. But when I looked at getting the workshops done here and actually doing modular in the workshops, I had to think, okay, so how can we do this? VCV requires that you actually know a little bit about modular or have a bit of understanding. Cherry Audio, I discovered this when I was getting ready for office hours, trying to do these kind of things. And I found out that Cherry Audio actually has a very clean system. So they actually designed their own free modules. You can do paid modules as well, but they have a complete set of free modules, and they're actually a little bit nicer looking. So they have a little bit better aesthetic, but they're a little bit easier to follow too because they're color coded. So I found that they're actually much better entry level, the Cherry Audio ones. And I think there's about 11 or 12 free modules, and then you can do paid modules. But the most important thing is the only thing you need to do the Cherry Audio is an email address. So that's it. Once you sign up for an email address, everything else is free on top of that. And then you can buy extra modules on top of that. And then Cherry Audio does a whole lot of other soft synths as well that they do. But I was looking for a system that was the lowest barrier of entry. VCV is, there's probably need 5 or 6 workshops just to get us started in VCV because it is pretty full on. Cherry Audio I found is going to be probably the better one for the workshops. But once you hit the ceiling in Cherry Audio and you still don't want to spend money, go to VCV. That's a little bit more advanced, a little bit more expansive as far as what you can do for free. And then you could choose either one if you want to spend a bit of money or go into hardware after that.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Very apropos. Nick and I were talking about Cherry Audio before. Cherry Audio is one of my old audio engineers that used to work for me, Dan Goldstein, here in Las Vegas. So when you come out, Karl, we'll all go to lunch. You can meet Dan. He's a good friend of mine.
That's great.
It's a great product.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas, asks, is the theremin an easy instrument to learn? What is the gold standard unit, the Moog?
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, no, I would say. In a word, it's not easy to learn at all.
It's easy to play with. I've played with one. It's easy to play with and make noise out of. It's hard to get it. Like when you watch someone actually play it, you're like, wow.
Well, there are actually, there is, I forget, I think it's the Moog do one which has got some digital aspect to it, which has got a quantizer, which means, because when you play a theremin, there's basically an aerial and 2 sensors, and one of them denotes the pitch, and you can do all of these kind of tiny little movements. And if you can switch the quantizing on, and then it becomes, it'll quantize to a kind of MIDI scale, so you can kind of get where you're going. But then no, it's not easy at all. Moog is probably the best. If you want to learn, though, there's a lady called Carolina Eick, who is a German thereminist, who has developed a kind of a technique which is almost like in the way that you learn piano fingering. She's just devised a kind of notation and system for playing theremin, kind of with a methodology, and she does lessons, and she is an awesome player, but you have to work hard too. She started when she was like 6, so she should be by now, but it is hard.
Let's get her on. Like someone's got to put that in the second hour. Let's get her on the second hour. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, so I've spoken to Paul a little bit about this. Paul just needs to spend $100 and just get yourself a second-hand theremin and play with it for a while, as Alex said, and then you'll discover that it's actually one of the hardest instruments to actually perfect.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I built one when I was about 25. I built a theremin from a kit from Southwest Products Corporation in Texas, actually. And they are very hard because it's kind of like rubbing your head and patting your stomach, where your left hand controls the amplitude and the attack of the note, and your right hand controls the frequency of the note. It's easier for people who are used to playing fretless string instruments like violins or upright bass, because you get to learn the position of your hand for a certain frequency. Only it's usually closer to the antenna and further away from the antenna than vertically or horizontally. But so you get to, and if you have perfect pitch, it's much better. If you're tone deaf, don't try and learn the theremin, please.
Next question.
Next one in from Douglas Carmichael. Studio Electronics has the ToneStar range. There's a link to it, of pre-patched Eurorack synth voices. Are there other pre-patched starting point voices that one can build a Eurorack system around?
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, yeah, there are plenty. Karl was showing the Neutron, which can be can be mounted in Eurorack, although it comes sort of desktop mounted. That's a great instrument. There's also, I've got the IntelliGel Atlantis, which is a pre-patched voice, which is really nice. Not quite sure whether you could buy them new still. There's also Pittsburgh Modular SV1. There are a bunch of them.
As a Pittsburgher, what do you think of Pittsburgh Modular? I found it as I was researching for this morning, or a couple
amongst the
sessions
best.
ago.
It's amongst the best sounding oscillators you could buy for the money. And more interestingly, he's partnered up with a company called Create Audio, that's CRE8. And again, I've got that here in a case. That's one of their cases, nifty case. And he's designed some oscillators for them, and they sound easily as good as the regular Pittsburgh ones, and they're kind of pretty affordable. They sound fantastic. Anything designed by Richard Nickel, who is the chief guy at Pittsburgh Modular, those oscillators are fantastic.
That's great. Carl?
So I was going to suggest that Behringer has 6. This is just one of them. So the one I was showing, there are 6 in the range that are Eurorack compatible, which means they can get their power from Eurorack and they can send out all the CVs and control all that stuff. So they've got the Wasp, they've got the Model D, which is probably the one I'd suggest to get as the Model D. The Neutron, which is the one we're showing here today. They've got the Pro one. They've got let's see if I can remember them all now. I'm missing one. The K2, which is the MS-20. And then the Wasp and the Cat. So there's the 6 that are Eurorack. So you can take them straight out of the box that Behringer gives you. You put them straight in. They actually give you the cable, Eurorack cable, because there's a cable that's required to do this. So they, rather than using the little D-tap, the little cable that they come with as far as power, AC power, you actually have the special cable that goes into a Eurorack module. I don't have mine in Eurorack because I'm using my Eurorack case for actual Eurorack modules rather than putting my Behringer ones in there. That'd fill up a case pretty fast. But as far as a full synth voice, then I'd suggest, so tone stars are pretty good, but if you want to go for about a third of the price, then I'd start probably with a Model D from Behringer.
Now go ahead, Courtney.
I had a question for Karl. I haven't used the Eurorack, so I'm not familiar with exactly how the setup is handled. Does the backplane that you plug the Eurorack modules in only carry power, DC power? Or does it carry any signals as well? Or does all the signal I/O come out through the front of the modules?
It's all out through the front.
Nothing is bust from the back. Then.
No, so internally the power is there. At the actual case itself, you get some cases that do have audio in and out, but they're always in from the front. Essentially, the case is sealed. So the only thing you'll find in the case is the power rails. So the power rails, which is there's a 12 volt minus, a 12 volt plus, and a 5 volt plus power rails in there. And then you get the cables, and the connectors are standardized. That's pretty much the only thing that's standardized in Eurorack is the actual cables. The size of the modules is standardized in height, but not standardized in width. So you can have, and they're called HP, so horizontal points. And so the HP, so the Euroracks that I'm showing today have HPs around 16, 14, that kind of size. So the Behringer ones, so they would be like a HP of like 70. So they'd have quite a wide HP. And HP is essentially, you'll notice screw holes. So one screw hole is 1 HP. So 4 screw holes would be 4 HP.
And
Nick, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yep.
I just wanted to say, and the patch cables are they all 1/4 inch TRS, TRRS, just TRS? Or are they smaller than the 1/4 inch?
So you're exactly right. So they are.
Those are 1/8 inch. Yes.
1/8 inch.
They're 1/8 inch, yeah.
1/8 inch, and they're TS. Very important that you only use TS. So so every manual will tell you do not use TRS, only use TS. And the reason why is because the TS cables have a little bit different gauge. Well, the actual head is a little bit different gauge, but there are 1/4 inch ones. So the Poly D from Behringer does use 1/4 inch mono TS patch cables at the back, and then of course the old 5U high, which would be the Moog modular from the 60s and some of that stuff. And synthesizers.com have recreations of those, and they're the 5U high ones, and they are 1/4 inch as well. And then of course the Roland ones from the late 1970s are also 1/4 inch. So some of them are also, some are 1/4 inch and some are 1/8 inch from Roland. So
and I will say, I like lots of colors, so I can figure out what I just did. So I I try to keep it, mix it up a little bit. Otherwise, I get lost in the patches. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to add to
I was
this.
just going to say there's some Doepfer, who was kind of considered the grandfather of Eurorack. He kind of invented it because it was repurposed kind of test equipment, scientific test equipment racks that he built modules to fit in, so it was very easy. There is actually a bus in some of the Doepfer stuff which will allow you to have gate and CV, so that would be pitch and trigger information will also run, but you need wider cables and you need modules that support it, so it will come up in the ribbon cable that goes around the back, so you don't have to then patch that. So there are some cases which do have that busing built in.
Next question.
And it's from Harshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida, and here on the panel. I recently watched a suggested video on YouTube. They used the term Z-decay. What does that mean?
Do we know what Z-decay is?
Gosh.
Yeah, you go ahead, Harshid.
It was known more so as decay, but the way that they used it, I didn't quite understand what decay meant, and so just wanted to know, according to Sense, what does decay mean?
I mean, I don't know how it. I actually don't know how it handles this. Most decay is how it's going to leave. So there's so the decay is if it hits, how long is it going to take for it? So usually, if you're attenuating the decay, it's how quickly it's going to drop out of the system. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, actually, in most envelopes have 5 stages: attack, decay, sustain, release.
Okay.
So some envelopes are just attack AR, which means they skip the decay. So basically, the attack is the amount of time it takes to get to the optimum volume. The decay is after that point, and the sustain is the level at which the note is. If you keep your finger on the keyboard, essentially, that's the level that it is at. And then when you let go, the release is the time it takes to die away. So the decay can be kind of a short, and the release can be long. So it depends on what you have. Basically, it's 5-stage envelope is what is the standard.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. I've moved to a larger space and will be upgrading my studio and looking at 3 synths that will cover the broadest ground possible. With the Novation Summit, Arturia Polybrute, and Sequential OB6 work well together for ambient 80s chill out.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford all 3, then fill your boots, I'd say. But they kind of cover. I mean, they are kind of covering similar ground because they are essentially all either analog or virtual analog. The OB6 has a thing that sometimes you can't hear, you just don't hear it anywhere else, and you go, oh, that's that sound. The Oberheim sound is very specific. It's perhaps not as flexible, although the OB6 does have a lot more interesting synthesis methods. I would recommend maybe switching one of them out. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one, but or enhance it with something nice and chunky mono synth. And I would move away from the regular subtractive Moog voice. I would consider something else, something that has a bit more character and a bit more sort of weight. And Neutron is a really good start again because it's a very flexible voice and it's got a ton of low end if you need it. And that's the thing that you will miss with some polysynths. You can get it, it's not impossible, but some synths that are just built to be mono can sometimes just have a more presence and fill more range. So I would say, Neutron or Pittsburgh Modular again, the SV1, or the Create Audio East Beast, West Pest, or, any one of those Behringer kind of affordable synths as well. But that's what I would consider.
You go, Carl.
I think, so as Nick said, all those synths kind of cover the same thing. They're all polyphonic, with the exception of maybe the Summit, which has FPGA oscillators, but after once it goes out of the oscillator stage, it's going to be all analog. I would suggest, as Nick said, I'd suggest a fat mono, which would be like a Poly D. So Poly D is kind of an original creation based on some ladder filters from Moog and that kind of stuff, and it's actually got the Roland chorus in there. So it's actually kind of a Frankenstein of some vintage stuff from the 70s and 80s. But the Poly D is probably one of the best synths you can get for the money as far as expanding something that you won't get out of a pad synth. So, they're all quite lush pad synths, but to actually get that kind of really sharp, Moog kind of sound, which you won't get out of those ones, the Poly D would probably be the most flexible, and it has aftertouch built in.
Next question.
Kenny Hampton, Greenville, Illinois. Are the patch bay points redirecting an analog or digital signal? What are the characteristics of the patching cables?
Go ahead, Carl.
All right, so let's actually get back to a little bit of the video of what we're going to cover. So the patch points. So I've shown here originally, so we've got here, and the reason why I didn't hook this one up is because we're going to cover a lot of what it would be doubling up. So I've left this one unplugged. But the patch points here are all analog. So with the exception of the MIDI here, so there is a MIDI in. That is digital, obviously, but other than that, and that's essentially inside this unit, there's a MIDI to CV converter, and simply converts that digital MIDI to CV, and then all the rest of it CV all the way through. But the other thing that we'll look at is going to be, I'm going to put this one aside, and then we're going to bring out the big one. So I'll bring this forward. It's heavy. And we'll switch back, and here we are. So this is Eurorack. So I'll just have to zoom out a bit. It's quite large. So with Eurorack, the way it works is essentially it's all analog all the way through. There are digital modules though. So I will say that there are digital modules. I've chosen not to have any in this particular setup, but in this particular setup, you actually have all analog modules. So essentially all these out are analog outs, and they're all between generally 0 volts, of course, up to like 12 volts in Eurorack. So Eurorack goes up to 12 volts. The control voltages, which are these ones down here, these are the inputs for control voltages anyway, they're generally up to maybe 5 volts. But they're all different. But generally it's between 0 and 5 volts or 0 and 12 volts. We actually have some stuff over here, which actually, we can actually zoom in on this because it's actually quite obvious what it actually does. So if we zoom in, we actually have voltages here that actually said what they are. So we actually have a plus 10 volt. So if you just turn this attenuator, all you're sending out of here is either between 0 or plus 10 volt. That's it. And then underneath it, we have these are two. So this is mixer and mixer, but these two little ones here are a little bit different. This is negative 10 volt. That's it. It's just sending out negative 10 volts. It's just a DC current. So in theory, you could actually power, if you put this to 5 volts, you could power, USB appliances with this. Just set it to 12 o'clock, set it to halfway. That's 5 volts. And then you can power a desk fan that's USB powered. So that's exactly what this is. All just DC. And then the audio signal is AC, of course. And of course, some of it's AC. But AC just means that it's alternating current. So all that means is that because all analog audio, which would be coming out of, let's say, going into these, because this is a mixer. But next to it here, we have a synth module. So the synth module that we have next to it, would have AC going in here. There's AC coming out of here, which this is the sound coming out, and then would have AC or DC coming in here for the control voltages. But so with Eurorack, it gets pretty complicated, but it is all analog. I have no MIDI in this particular Eurorack. I've chosen not to because I have so many devices that can do MIDI, like the Neutron. The Neutron can be my MIDI interface. And so I simply plug in a keyboard to the Neutron, and the Neutron can interface with this with all of its patch points. But essentially what we have here, I'll quickly go over what we have here just very quickly. So I'll slide this around a little bit so it makes it a little bit easier. So up the top here, what we have is we have 2 oscillators. So these are the oscillators we saw before. So we have 2 oscillators. We have 2 VCS, which are the filters. So these are dual filters. Essentially, they're independent, but there's just 2 in one module. 2 VCAs, which is a voltage-controlled amplifiers. And then we actually have a synth voice over this side, which we looked at earlier. So this is actually a VCO, a VCF, so an oscillator, a filter, and an amplifier in one module. So we call this a synth voice. It's not a full synth because it doesn't have any modulation built into it, but it is what we call a synth voice. Then we have some utility modules, and so the utility modules would be the mixer, and this is dual mixer with portamento built in on the side here. And as I said, we actually have just what's called a bias, so we can actually send out a bias of negative and plus. And then we actually have phase over this side, so we can actually send out phase out of the unit, and we've got audio delay, we have a gate delay, we have an LFO, and then when we come down the bottom, this is where we have the sequencer.
And one of the keys there is, as you're looking through that, is that each one of these it's not that this whole rack, the reason it's modular is that the whole rack is not one piece. You are buying, or in some cases, some people build these each pieces. I just want to keep on underlining that for people because I think that it's seen as like a unit because you tied it all in. Nick is showing another module, and that's what you have in front of you, Nick. Is that your modular setup there? I don't know if you can hear me, Nick. I think you might be muted in Zoom.
Pardon, I beg your pardon. Yeah, all this is it's the same as what Karl has, except mine comes in a case which has a keyboard with it, which means it's viable for me to just play.
How do you get the keyboard into the rack?
Well, it's not actually in the rack. It's actually a keyboard enclosure with a Eurorack above it. So this part is where you put the modules, and this part is the bit. So if I took all of this out, there'd just be an empty. It'd be empty like this. And so, but it has.
But I mean, but the sound of the keyboard, it does it have a lot of outputs, or does it have just a handful, and they just tie into the Eurorack? Is that how that works?
Well, on this guy, this can play up to 4 notes at a time. So the keyboard has 4 sets of outputs. So you can route them however you wish. And then there's 2 audio outputs. So anything that you take out of here would go into one of the stereo outputs here. And that's where you'd listen to it in the outside world, basically.
And again, one of the advantages is you get to see it. You get to see what everything's going to. I'm taking this and putting it into here. I'm routing this into there. Did you want to add anything, Nick, to the characteristics of patching cables?
Well, not so much. I mean, the thing, no. I mean, basically, as you said, Alex, it's just a question of get all sorts of lengths and all sorts of colours, because you're guaranteed whatever you buy, there'll be a point where you think, I can't quite reach between these 2 points and I really need to. So that's why you have more than you need.
But if you get everything too long, you end up with just tons of cable laying around, right?
Well, it's a small price to pay to not be able to patch.
Well, and they make rack. They make like what I've seen for some next to some people who are working on it is kind of a rotary system where they have them all like hanging at different lengths, so they can just kind of rotate them around and pull out the one that they want next at many different lengths. So yeah, it's interesting. Do you have more to show, Karl?
Well, I was just going to show you like a patch. So these are essentially the short patches here. So these are essentially if you're going between, so here in the synth module at the top here. So this is actually pre-wired, so you can actually see there's actually, here it actually shows that it's actually pre-wired for certain things. But if I wanted to go out of the VCO and go straight into something else, then you're right. You can actually do it very short, and it keeps it nice and neat. And then, of course, you have longer ones, which these I think are around 45 centimeters. It's about 1.5 feet. I personally like to use pretty much between 60 and 90. I've got some ridiculous ones, because it's not just between this particular unit I'm using it with. I'm actually going between this and other units that accept the same thing. So I'm actually going between actual whole devices. So I have ones that are 2 meters long. So I can actually go like the other side of the table, come back. And so, and I have ones that are, 15 centimeters long. But yeah, so the way it actually works is, so essentially I've got a sequencer running here. This is not a quantized sequencer, so it's going to be atonal. And essentially what we can do is we actually have outputs here. So we have a CV out, which is actually going to be the note value. So it's like we're actually playing a note. And we'll use a synth module up top here because it's nice and close and everyone can see it on camera. So I can go out of that, and I'm going to go into, so this is actually the control voltage down here. So this control voltage, this is actually where you'd put the note in from a keyboard if you had a keyboard, but I'm just using the sequencer for this one. But that won't do much at all. I actually have the outputs going from here out into the flow 8. So we're actually getting sound out of the actual mixer module. And so essentially we don't have, now we've got the gate. Now the gate, as we said before, we can put into an envelope. So I can put it into the envelope over here. And then the output of the envelope, we want to go into the VCA. So, and the VCA is down here. But we can actually, there's a little line here that tells me that the VCA, whatever goes in here, goes in here. So we can have both going into there. And then we want the output of the actual VCA going into a mixer. So therefore it will go into the flow 8. So we'll put that over here into the mixer. And we'll turn up the channel on the mixer, turn up the volume. There we go. Now I'll make sure that original sound is on. So as I said, this is atonal. Now I can change the filter. But instead of using my finger, we can actually control the filter, what I'm seeing here. So I can control the filter using, so we'll plug that one into the VCA. And then we'll plug this one into an inversed version, so an upside down version.
What's that adjusting there when you're moving those sliders?
So essentially what I'm doing is, if I put an inverse one in here, it's going to be the inverse of what we're hearing. If we bring the filter down. So I'm adjusting the VCA. The VCA is controlling both the amp.
And can you define VCA again for people who are watching?
So voltage controlled amplifier. So the voltage controlled amplifier, so this is the amplifier. So essentially, if I turn down the control voltage, which is the yellow one, if I turn that down, we have nothing. Because the amp is, now I can just turn up the bias. So this is the volume knob essentially on the VCA. And that, what you're hearing there, the changes in tone there, is actually the filter. So that's actually the filter you're hearing change. But if I take down the volume knob and then we turn back up the control voltage, but now we can actually separate, and let's put bring down the filter a bit. I'm going to put the filter on its own envelope. So this is the envelope here. So we're going to have a different envelope for the filter. So we actually get the, we'll go a plucky sound.
And Nick, if you want to add, Nick or Courtney, if you want to add anything while he's walking through it, go ahead and just jump in. We don't really have a system for you to raise your hand. Go ahead, Karl.
All right. And so what I'm doing here is now we've got the control voltage. I need to get the same control voltage out of the sequencer into 2 different envelopes. So next door, we actually have a mult. So I can go into the mult, which is a multiple. And from the multiple, I can take that same signal. It's a gate signal telling me when to hit. I can go into 1, and I can take another gate signal, the same signal. This is just telling the envelope when to go, when to start. And we go on to a second one. So now we've got the same signal coming out of the gate out, which is a green one, and we're sending it to both of these. And so if I bring up my... So now, if I turn this one down and turn that up, that's the filter not being modulated at all. But if we modulate the filter,
now is the filter being modulated by the different voltages coming out of the sequencer, or is it being modulated
so the green one,
with a single trigger voltage?
So there's a trigger voltage coming out of the sequencer, that's correct. So it's a gate. That's going to a mult, and the mult's being set to both of them. And it's actually the envelope here. So this second envelope here, that's actually controlling the filter. So if I bring that down, the filter will go nearly away, or bring it up. Very basic. And if I actually bring up... So you get a brassy sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the modulation, really, with an analog Eurorack synthesizer. It's more about what your imagination lets you do, and it's just everything is available to you. So once you get the principles, you can do kind of pretty much whatever you want.
That's right.
And can you explain as best you can how the modulation is affecting the signal there? When you say it's all about it.
Do you want to do that, Karl, or me? I'm happy to.
So essentially what's happening here, so if we take away the modulation, it makes it a little bit obvious. So we'll take away the modulation off the filter, and we'll just open up the filter completely. I'll turn the volume down a bit so it's not so annoying. So there we go. So, and then we can take the modulation off the actual amp as well. So no modulation amp. And that is just note to note to note to note. That is one stream of a note. So it's a single tone. The only thing changing is the pitch. And the pitch is going to be the red one. Now, if I unplug the red one, it's just one note.
Right.
So one note, because we have no keyboard here, the sequencer is doing it. So now we have multiple notes. I can change the octaves, bring it down an octave, go up an octave, but we'll keep it in the middle.
And where is the pitch being defined?
The pitch is being defined here in the sequencer. So you see this lights going down, down, down.
Right.
So this is an analog sequencer. So if I change, let's say I change the very first 2 notes in the sequencer to be very high. So that's how you change the notes in the sequencer. Now you can usually with these, you can do atonal stuff, or I've just got it set to atonal as an example here. And essentially, so the notes are coming out of the red one and they're going to the VCO, but that only tells it what pitch to be. It doesn't tell it when to be on or off. And that's going to be the green one. And the green one is being sent and being doubled up to the black and white. So the green one is becoming the black and white to control the envelope. And that's simply a gate saying on and off. Then the envelopes are actually sending out the shapes. So if we bring the amp one down, looks like we've got 2 same notes there. Sounds a bit weird. But we can actually bring down the initial, and we can actually just have this plucky sound again. And if we bring this up, but now the filter's not dynamic at all. So the bottom one, the second envelope here, and we bring up.
Now, what did you do there to have it sound more muted?
So essentially what I've got here is what's happening here is the envelope is saying, move this knob up and down. But essentially it's what I'm asking, because I'm going out positive. So this gray's coming out of the positive one, so it's going to move up. It's only going to move up and then come back to where it's at, where it is. If you have it at full top at the moment, it can't go anywhere up and it can't come down any further. So it's not going to change. It's not going to be dynamic. If I bring it all the way down and then say, okay, now start going up, do that, and go up a little bit. So now, I can actually change the tone of the filter.
And how is that affecting that, where it goes from being kind of a hard sound to a soft sound?
So that's the filter. So the filter cutoff, if we actually just don't have anything, so nothing. So the filter's just running by itself now. So the filter essentially is bright or dark. So it's so dark it's actually completely gone. So my finger here is controlling it. Mm-hmm. But what I want is the envelope to control it. And it makes it more plucky. Well, this is a plucky sound. You can get more of a release sound. So if we put the release way up. So more of a brass sound.
And if you make the attack longer, it sounds more like a string being bowed rather than a...
That's right. So if I actually bring down the tempo, and we'll go... So if we go attack, so this is it. I'll turn off everything else. So we need to have some filter there. So strings would have a bit of release as well. It's a bit of a string sound, but then you want to bring in the actual filter itself. You can have this long attack sound. You can have full release. So the release will be so without the release, the note will end very suddenly.
One thing that is worth mentioning at this point is we have in the business, we have something called modular time. And modular time is the time you lose when you are spending time at a modular synthesizer, and you just sort of, you get into the zone or the flow, and before you know it, it's dark or even morning, and you're still doing what you do.
I have to say that I have not ever produced anything on a mod. I have a bunch of pieces over here. I've never produced anything that I'd be willing to actually play for somebody, but I've experienced the modular time where suddenly I get out of office hours and I started, I'm going to play with this for a little, and then it's like dinner. And I was like, what happened?
It's known as the black hole generator. It's over on the right module that generates the expansion of time. Yes,
it's just like gone. Like it just evaporates, and it's because you once you start when you understand, like even when you don't understand it, when you're plugging something in and just playing with something and hearing it do the effect, then you can hear something in your head and then you try to find it, and that's the thing that takes a long time.
One of the things I would say is I have an advantage in that most of the time I'm playing with this stuff for review purposes. So I have a goal, I have a kind of fixed get out point.
What does it do here? How does it do here?
What is
yeah,
it?
Exactly.
But also, I mean, I know that there are a lot of composers and media people who want to use it, but they can't because they don't have the time because the deadline doesn't allow it, which means that you end up in a situation where, you know, unless you're creating something very specific and visceral, which is a sound that you might just find with a really weird patch you set up earlier, because quite often what a lot of people use for modulars is they might create a kind of palette of sounds that they would record and then maybe sample and use within a project rather than real time in a project, because it's very difficult to do this, you know, unless you're extremely experienced and extremely disciplined as well. So, yeah.
Well, and this kind of gets into the next question. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question that we have here.
Javier Alfaro from Mexico City, Mexico. What is the best way to save the routing on analog synths for future use? Do you use traditional recall sheets, or is there a better way?
Go ahead, Nick.
There isn't really a better way. There are two things that you have. One, take a photograph or series of photographs. That's probably the best thing. Or if you want to use a recall sheet and write it down, I'd take a photograph. It's much easier. We got good photo. But the biggest and probably the best way to do it is to commit and record it, and then pull all the patch cords out and start again. You know, that's the hardcore way to do it. I know but I suspect sometimes you see people like Deadmau5, you see people with huge modular systems, Junkie XL, and I think it's probably because they've got a really nice sound on this bit and they had to grow their modular to fill because they never wanted to take that patch down because it was really useful in something, and they've actually just made it bigger and bigger because they don't want to break the patch down, so they just get bigger and bigger. I think
it's just cheaper to buy another set of exactly the same things than to take that one apart. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Karl.
The other way, what else you can do is, where Nick says record it, you can actually go on Logic and use Logic's sample. So you can actually sample it. So it'll send it just every note, you know, on the keyboard essentially, and it'll send it at different lengths. You can actually set up in the sampler and it will take a while, but it'll go through and it'll sample it like a short note, a long note for every single note. And that way you actually have essentially a virtual software instrument of your modular patch. And then once you've done all that, and you go through test and make sure it's all good, then pull it all out. Make sure you pull it all out. So it's really important to actually pull out all the patches once you've actually done. Because if you don't, you'll actually... You won't use that synth again, and it'll actually start to limit you creatively because you'll start to be very precious about it. So go and use a Logic feature. I think there's one in Ableton. There's a few, and most DAWs will have them. And we'll actually go through and we'll send out every note, you know, between A0 up to C7, C8, right up through, and it'll do them at different lengths depending on what you specify. And so it'll get you a very good quality. So if you want to do a short note, a long note, a really long note, and then when you go and play them, you know, in the virtual instrument that it will create for you, because it actually creates that for you as well in Logic. Essentially, you're playing your analog synthesizer with the patch you created, and because it knows velocity. By the way, you can actually have velocity in these things. So the different velocities that Logic sends, because you can tell it, hey, play six different velocities from quiet to loud. When you go play them back again on your software synth that you've made, if your synth understands velocities, which the Neutron does, so I can actually have the Neutron be hooked up to the keyboard or to the computer via USB. Then the Neutron would talk to this larger synth and it can actually send out velocity information. So velocity information can actually change. I want the filter to be very bright if I press hard on the note, or to be not so bright, to be a bit more darker. And Logic can do all of that. So you can actually get some pretty cool dynamics out of Logic and other apps to record it, but then take the patch cables out. And then what that does, when you take the patch cables out, you have a clean slate, and you'll have a new creation after that.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. You were going to add something.
Yeah, it's called Auto Sampler. It's a little thing in Auto Sampler, and you can set the key range you want it to cover, and you can set the number of velocity layers and all that kind of stuff. And I use it all the time because we often do free samples from things that we review, and I don't use Logic. I make them in something called Decent Sampler, which is a free plugin that you can stuff. But yeah, it's definitely worth thinking of doing that.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I have a Kurzweil K2000 sampler that I have plugged into mine so I can sample into the keyboard and then play those samples later. When I first started in electronic music was with a Moog Modular 5, and to save our setups, we used a Polaroid camera because digital cameras hadn't been invented yet. And we also had printed out large sheets of paper that had all the modules arranged and the way that the Modular 5 was set up. And we just drew with colored markers the patch layout if we wanted to preserve it and didn't have a Polaroid camera that would have enough resolution to cover the entire setup.
Yeah, my first one was an EMU Emax. Next question.
Next question for David Brady, New York, New York. Do you color code your patch cables? Similar to modular, I'm big on LZX video modulars, where I can use stackable patches. Are those applicable in audio?
Go ahead, Karl.
You can actually stack cables as far as taking two out, but as far as color coding, no. So that's it. It's just a mess. So if you can, in theory, you can. So in theory, you can actually buy, if you want to spend a little bit extra money, you can actually buy certain lengths in certain colors. Normally they don't do that. Normally you just get multicolors at the same length. But you can actually, or you can be very pedantic and you can actually buy, let's say there's a set that has 8 different colors. You can buy 8 sets of that set, and therefore you'd have 8 reds, 8 blues, 8, all at the same length. And then you can actually just use the reds from that set, for that length. But most people don't. Most people that use the 1/4 inch, the larger ones for like Moog, are all black. So sometimes they put color tape around the tips, but with Eurorack, they chose, because it's a little bit more modern and it's a little bit easier to make these, they chose to just do different colors. As long as you kind of know what's going on, it's not so bad. But if someone else tries to figure out what you're doing, it looks like spaghetti.
All I got to say is I was today years old when I learned that there was a video modular system. Like minutes on, minutes old. I looked at it, I was like, oh no, like there's a whole nother like modular time zone that could go into this. Wow. Okay. There's another second hour. Josh, another second hour there. We got to figure that out. All right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. Douglas asks, Jaspers, a German company, offers XL series stands for tall players. There's a link to it. As someone that is 5'9" should I choose the XL stand, 160 centimeters, versus the conventional stand at 140 centimeters?
Karl?
All the stands I have are adjustable. So they can go from about 1.5 feet, I think about 45 centimeters at their lowest, up to, well, my stand here with 4 on it goes above my head height. So the top sense is actually about, $1.80 m, $1.90 m. So it's a little over 6 feet. So the top of the sense. So it can go as high as you really want. But most X-shaped stands, so the ones that are X-shaped, and even the monolith stands, they're adjustable. You'll see on the manufacturers like specifications what their lowest height and their highest height is. But vast majority of them are for anyone between pretty much 5 feet and 6.5 feet. That should be fine with nearly any stand.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA. Karl or Nick, can you demonstrate how these adjustments shown are used to produce a familiar musical hook?
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, that's a bit on the spot. I don't know too many, but I might be able to make some familiar sounds.
That's
So
great.
on this system, excuse me, I've got to move my mic around. I've just got. Let's have a look. Let's just get a sound here. So this is a pretty standard sound. We've got a short envelope. But what I'll do is I've got an arpeggiator which will just basically repeat it. You might, that's your kind of acid type sound, which I suppose you might be familiar with. But maybe some other sounds would be, why not pulse width modulation? It seems to be what I'm known for. So this sound is quite a common sound. And what I'm doing in this is I've got a square wave and I'm just moving this parameter here with this LFO, which is essentially modulating the sound. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of, once you start, you can get to all sorts of places, but it does help if you, once you have a certain amount of familiarity with it, it's a lot easier to do. But I mean, a familiar hook, I'm not really a player in that sense, so I hope that'll do.
Yeah, go ahead, Karl.
I was trying to get the sound or the music from Close Encounters, That's probably the only thing I could probably program on a synth in short notice. But I got 3 notes, but I didn't get the other 2, so it's still a bit atonal. The way you do that with this is you use a tuner. You just simply use a tuner and you just do one note at a time. And you go, okay, I want A, then I want the next note is C. That's how you do it with an analog sequencer like this. And so what I'll do, maybe I'll have it going the next time we do synths. I'll actually have that running so you can hear the Close Encounters 5 notes that John Williams put together.
It might be kind of fun at some point, maybe in a lab, to take something and try to reproduce it, from what we, just a standard, some kind of synth piece, like take something out of, the obvious thing is something like Depeche Mode or something like that. And you say,
so my go-to is usually Vangelis with every synth I do the Blade Runner sound.
Yeah. So I mean, like some little piece from Depeche Mode, and just like how could I create that? And then I think that sometimes finding that would be, go ahead, Nick. You were going to show something.
It helps if you've got a keyboard.
Yeah, there you go. It's easier with a keyboard, because with a sequencer, as Karl's got, what happens is you have to dial in each individual note, and because they're continuously, it's like turning a knob to kind of, it's very hard to hit the actual each note. It's kind of quite difficult. So,
yeah, absolutely. Next question.
And it's from Ken Jordan in Surrey, UK. I already own the Poly D and the Neutron. Is there another synth you can recommend that can produce a lower fat sound?
Go ahead, Karl.
Poly D is pretty much it. So the Poly D will get some pretty fat sound. It's got the Moog oscillators. It's got the Moog filter. It has the chorus too, so you can actually, you can do some pretty cool stuff with the chorus. Anything fatter than that is like, maybe like a matriarch. So the only thing I can think of is like a matriarch.
It also has overdrive built into it.
It has overdrive built in. And at the back you can patch bay it, so you can actually do some pretty funky stuff with actually, sending certain CVs into other things, so you can actually make it louder, because it actually has a loudness input, which is interesting. So you can actually control the volume. Essentially, it's not the VCA; it's actually the volume out. So. But no, the Poly D is the one. Poly D would be probably the ones we do, and when we do a workship in after hours, Poly D is one of the ones that's going to come out, because it's a very versatile synth, and I think it's a great synth for under $1,000 US. If you're interested, it's one of the better ones. But the Neutron can make some pretty fat sounds. The Proton is coming out, but the chip shortage has delayed a lot of the new synths coming out from Behringer. But there is a Proton coming out, which is more advanced. By the way, the Neutron. And the DeepMind 12, which is their lush, polysynth, they are original creations by Behringer. So they have, and a lot of people praise them because the Neutron is actually so versatile, and it's because it's kind of a kitchen sink. The engineers from Midas, I believe, the Midas engineers, the analog engineers who developed the analog boards, the analog mixing boards for Midas, they were given the hey, you want a fun project? Here you go. Create an analog polysynth and an analog monosynth, and they created the DeepMind 12, which is a polysynth, and the Neutron, which is technically their monosynth, but it's actually paraphonic and can do 2 notes. But that was actually the analog engineers from Midas that used to make the analog desks for them back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Oop, can't hear you.
I was going to say there are other, the thing about Moogs, which there's nothing necessarily wrong with them, but what they have is a characteristic with the filter. When you bring resonance, I'll try and demonstrate here. If you bring resonance in, you lose the low end. This particular instrument has a boost. So you see, as I bring the resonance up, the bass seems to disappear. But with the bass boost, you keep all of the low end. Now, the thing is, that's very common to the world of Moog, because the Moog ladder filter just has that characteristic. So if you get anything that is Moog-like and you want to have sounds with resonance in, then I would put a case forward for other kind of synth voices, really, that don't do the characteristic, like the, there are a number of other filters. The Neutron doesn't do that. There's also Pittsburgh, yeah, again, I know I keep saying it, and Roland filters don't tend to do it so much as well. So if you want SEO2, there are other flavors of low end, and I think just using a ladder filter, you kind of lose a lot of low end when you want to get some sort of resonance in the filter, and that's a shame.
Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask Karl if he knows of a hybrid that is a analog synth that is digitally controlled, that allows you to has a MIDI interface so that you can preserve your patches. It knows what control voltages are being generated and can You can program it using MIDI, a MIDI program that records and plays back MIDI. But it's total analog synthesis.
If we're talking like a Neutron, like a Model D kind of style, then the SEO2, the Roland SEO2, which was made in partnership with Studio Electronics, so that is completely MIDI controllable. All the pots on it are actually digital, but they're controlling an analog synth underneath, which means that every parameter, with one exception, there's only one parameter you can't store, and that is tuning. So the actual tuning of the synth, the coarse tuning of the synth is analog only. And so that's something, because the reason why is because when you walk up to synths, you have to tune it. So that's the only thing you can't do, but fine tuning can be done via MIDI and stored patches. That's a Roland one. That's a boutique series, which is completely analog, but is completely recordable as far as that. And you can even polychain them. So that's pretty cool. The other one I would suggest would be the DeepMind 12. So DeepMind 12 from Behringer is fully analog, but it is completely digitally controlled, and you can record patches and you can stack them. So you can actually have two DeepMind 12s, so you turn into a DeepMind 24. So you have a 24 voice synth, completely digitally controlled, but but it's all 100% analog synth underneath, except for the effects. The effects is digital. But all that, yeah. So essentially, there are many synths out there, but as far as one that has like a lot of knobs and a lot of ins and outs, is the SEO2 from Roland.
Go ahead, Nick. You were going to add.
Yeah, I was also going to say it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for modular, like this kind of thing, restorable, there's it's schools of thought. It's like, well, I'm not sure that that's really what they were designed for. There are ways of taking the control signals and having them generated via MIDI and other things, and then just keeping the sound sources such as the filter and the filters and using those in analog. Or if you're just looking for an analog synth programmable, Novation Base Station 2 is a pretty good one as well, and that's pretty advanced. It's perhaps not as chunky sounding as some of the sort of purer analogs, but it's a pretty good start, and it's got a lot of features these days because they keep updating it with firmware.
So are there MIDI to CV modules that go into the modulars that will take a MIDI note input and output a control voltage based on the MIDI note?
Yeah, there's
right.
that
So
most. I mean, most modern desktop synthesizers come with that part. I mean, this one here, if I go, I mean, this is just a case, but essentially what it's got is, there's a MIDI interface here, and it outputs the CV and gate and velocity and modulation and all sorts of other stuff, and that comes as standard, and it's just then what you put inside it. And most cases now, I think Arturia do one. I think Arturia do again. Most modern cases even have MIDI interfaces built into them, so you just need a MIDI cable, and then that'll bring you into the world of modular, and then you're off. And then there's no hope for you, I'm afraid.
What a great hour. We got a couple more questions. Let's go do real quick. Go ahead. Next question.
Yeah, from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. With seemingly all parameters adjustable, what makes various manufacturers' brands sound so recognizable and exclusive? Any black box magic?
Go ahead, Karl.
So it's actually got to do with the electronics underneath. What we're actually not seeing here is actual electronics. Essentially, so Moog has this, 4-pole ladder filter. And then ARP tried to put that in like 1969 into their 2500, and Dr. Moog actually came along. Robert Moog came along and said, no, you can't do that. So Alan Perlman actually changed it. And so they actually have a different kind of filter, completely different electronics, different kind of diodes set up, completely different everything. And then Roland came along, and the Roland had this very Roland filter. That's the way we kind of say it. It's a very Roland filter. It's a ladder filter, similar, but they've also got some multi-mode filters and other stuff. So Roland has a sound. Yamaha has more of a softer sound. They have more of a 12 dB, so there's bit more of a softer, not as hard-edged as Moog and as Roland. But they all have completely different electronic, different ways.
And they have different, and a lot of it's the teams working on them have different opinions about what sounds good, right? I mean, that's right. They're not trying to really copy. I mean, Behringer copies a little bit.
Behringer's. So the thing about Behringer, and this should be said, so Behringer's recreating synths that haven't been made in over 40 years.
Right.
You can't go buy. So Moog is not Moog. So this should be known. Moog is actually created. The Moog that we know now is actually a fanboy company that got the licensing to have the name. It's actually a Kickstarter that actually turned into a pretty big company because there's other fanboys out there. This is not the actual original Moog company. That Moog company went bust and got bought out. The part of the Moog company that still survives is known as the Moog Foundation. So part of that company actually that rolled over to the daughter of Robert Moog, and the Moog Foundation is technically the only surviving part of the original company. Moog, as we know it now, is actually a fanboy company that just got the rights to the name, and their profits go to the Moog Foundation. That's kind of the agreement they have. But Behringer's actually making instruments that aren't made anymore. So if Behringer didn't make them, there's no way to buy them unless you're buying it from a collector, not a person who plays them, but they actually collect them. And the only reason they collect them is because they're going up in value because no one ever makes them. So Behringer coming into the market has actually caused these collectors to get a little bit angry because their little, goose that lays a golden egg is now getting less valuable because there's other ways to get to those sounds now rather than buying these vintage synths. You're going to add, Nick?
Well, Bob Moog actually used to be part of the current Moog Music Inc. I mean, he was he rejoined. I mean, there was difficulty with the name and the brand, but him and Mike Adams worked together, so it was actually the proper Moog at the time, and there was lots of engineers there as well. And as far as the Behringer stuff goes, yes, sure, they do make stuff that you can't make, but they also announced a lot of things that are still being made, and they have been quite aggressive in their going after existing stuff, but that's probably not for this. I'd just like to put a hand up for some of the people who actually go, wait a minute, they said if I don't let them make it, they're just going to crush me, which is their way. Just saying.
What was I going to say about that? Anyway, I forgot. But it's interesting. Well, but I thought that the most interesting thing, I don't know. I watched the documentary about the 808, and the interview with the Japanese creator, and he just said, and then there was what made the 808 was a essentially damaged chips that they were pulling out of that were being discarded, and they found that if they used this one chip that when it was it created that sound, and then they said, and then they fixed it. And then they couldn't make it again. And even the RD8 is still trying to get back to that, right? I mean, it's not back to that, but it's trying to get back to that.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, and it's a very different kind of user. It's more modern user interface than the 808s. I've got an 808 like from Roland, and it's a pain to actually program compared to the Behringer one's a little bit easier. But I think Roland is the one company Behringer's scared of. Every time that Roland just slips a little note under their door, Behringer changed stuff. They changed their manuals, they changed the name of the product. So Roland is the company Behringer's scared of, because Roland are the big boys in this particular space, I think.
And they haven't gone for Yamaha yet. Have you noticed? Yamaha being
one of the biggest
corporations in the world. So
we know the CS80 is coming out very soon, so you know it's coming.
Yeah, they'll get away with that myself, but that's for another time, perhaps.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good. We should do a second hour where we just talk about the business and the issues and the history of synths. Because I think that I think backing up a little bit and just talking about it so we kind of understand the market that we're in, I think sometimes is useful. I know we don't talk about politics and religion, but we might still bring that conversation in. Thanks so much to everyone here. Thanks for the great questions to everyone. Thanks to Karl and Nick and Courtney for your expertise in this area. It's always great to have you here. I love doing this once a month. Like I just, I grew up playing with them, and I've never been very good at it, but I enjoy it. Like it just brings me joy to play with synths. So it's really great to learn from all of you. So thank you so much, and thanks again to the incredible team on the back end trying to keep up with us as we jump around and move things around and go through it. So we're hoping to do some kind of synth once a month. Some kind of discussion there. There's a couple folks that I'm going to try to drag in as well to keep on adding to the discussion. So we'll play with that as well. But I think it's I'd love to have it be like once a month. It's almost like a user group that we're getting together and really talking through these. And stay tuned. We are working on some workshops, some labs, so on and so forth that are going to be coming up too. So this is just the beginning of us thinking about this stuff. All right. Thanks so much. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. Mitchell's covering his ears because I just have to wait and not say anything.
Generate a whisper sound with a noise generator.
Yeah. 134,000 miles, 216,000 kilometers. We covered a lot of ground today. A lot of jumping from one part of the world to another.
And more frequencies than we normally cover.
Oh, so many. More frequencies, more miles. It's so dark. I don't know what happened. We're stuck on the black. I'm now just trying